reminds me, I haven't posted the video from last class yet. Yeah, so maybe I'll do that at the same time today. All right, so really nothing to download today. We've got some data that will be helpful to us as we're doing some examples today. But I've got, uncharacteristically, like a slideshow presentation. So let's kind of talk through a little bit about the background stuff. We are today, as well as next time we get together, which won't be Wednesday because we have another recruiting day for the MBAs. So we get the class off, and we'll meet again next Monday. We'll do more database stuff then. So first thing I want to make clear is that in database management, really recently, only about the past 10 years, have we gotten really serious about using stuff besides relational database management. So it used to be that when we said database, we almost always meant relational database. What's relational database? Anyone know? We say, what makes a database relational? Yeah. It's kind of like a pivot table. Well, it's a table. Relational databases organize their data in tables. In fact, relations, the mathematical term for table. And so since the 1970s, this is the way that we've thought about databases. We put your data into a table, and that's how we're going to organize it. And that worked pretty well until about the year 2000 or so. And that's when for the first time, we had companies that were so big that it didn't matter how big the computer was, you couldn't hold the whole database on one machine. And so companies like Facebook and Google said, you know, Oracle, which was the king of relational database management, you know, we just can't, and the idea behind relational database management is I've got a central server that controls all my data. And everyone accesses that one place to get the data. And that works great if you've got thousands of users, but not if you have millions of users. It works great if you've got billions of records, but not if you've got quadrillions of records. And so, so things have changed, but relational database is still the king of where we store corporate data. And so that's what we'll be kind of learning how to access today. The ideas of accessing databases that are not in relational databases is a little bit different, but a lot of the same ideas apply. So what we're talking about here mostly is not really relational database, but it's just database. This is kind of how databases work. The important thing about databases is the data. I love this slide, data. Okay, so that's what it's about. So always, we've got some kind of software, in any kind of database system, we've got some kind of software that manages the data. This data is categorically non-visual, which means it just runs as a service somewhere, and you don't see it. Now, there's other programs that interact with that database engine that let you get access and control the data, but the engine itself is non-visual data, or non-visual software, and it is in charge of all these things: data security, data integrity, data recovery. So what do we mean by security? You know, making sure that no one gets access to the data who's not authorized to get access to the data. How about integrity? If somewhere in the database we say, you know, this is an order that was placed by customer number 16, there darn well better be a customer number 16. Data recovery, data recovery. Right in the middle of updating something and someone pulls the cord out of the power supply or something and it fails, the engine needs to be able to, when it comes back to life, go, oh my gosh, I was right in the middle of something, let's fix that. Data definition, actually creating the tables, data manipulation, put the data into the tables, but it spends most of its time all day, every day running queries. So we give it a query, it's got access to this data repository, we ask it a question, it gives us the answer. We ask it another question, it gives us the answer. That's what it spends its time doing. Oh, so we've got, I'm really not sure this is really worth showing. How many of you have seen Star Trek 4? You probably weren't even born, this movie was. Are you familiar with these characters? You know who that is? Yes or no? Montgomery Scott, chief engineer for the original Enterprise. This is Leonard Nimoy. No, that was Spock. This is DeForest Kelley, but what's his character's name? McCoy, he's a ship's doctor. Anyway, what we're about to see is these guys from the future come back and have to interface with the computers of the 1980s. And it's a little bit of a culture shock for them, but it's really to emphasize the point that we've got to have some way to interact with whatever the system is. I'm going to jump ahead to one 56.
Polly Pocket Compacts. School book.
Apparently, we're going to watch.
Oh, wow.
Can't even skip it. Video will play after.
Session. School book compacts. A gymnastics lesson.
Makes me
Polly
wonder
Pocket
what
Compacts.
algorithm they
Each
used
sold
to make me think this
separately.
was my advertisement. What did I say? 156 or so?
Well, this is a fine place you have here, Dr. Nichols.
Thank you. And I must say, Professor, your knowledge of engineering is most
Oh,
impressive.
where's the volume?
Back all week calling the miracle worker.
Indeed. May I offer you something, gentlemen?
Dr. Nichols, I might be able to offer
I don't know how to make it louder.
Yes?
something with polymers.
Still. What else would I be working with?
What else?
On this?
Indeed?
Yeah, it's
I'll
all
put
the
it
way
another
up.
way.
Yeah, it's all the way up.
How thick would a piece of your plexiglass need to be at 60 feet by 10 feet to withstand the pressure of 18,000 cubic feet of water?
Okay, so he's trying to make it, they're from the future. They don't have any currency. They got to get a bunch of plexiglass to make a tank inside a stolen Klingon bird of prey to take some whales to the future. The reason they got to get whales to the future is beyond the scope of this discussion.
Oh, that's easy. 6 inches. We carry stuff that big in stock.
I noticed. Now suppose, just suppose, I were to show you a way to manufacture a wall that would do the same job, but be only 1 inch thick. Would that be worth something to you, eh?
You're joking.
Perhaps the professor could use your computer.
Oh, no.
Please.
The original Apple Macintosh computer.
Computer? Computer? Ah. Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
The keyboard.
The keyboard. How quaint.
Okay. So, very interesting. When this was made, of course, the thought that you could like talk to your computer and just interact by voice still seemed pretty far in the future. That's kind of here now today, so that's kind of neat. All right, I don't know where I am here. How do I get back to move on to the next slide? Oh, there we go. Okay, so we have then front-end application, different software that communicates with the user. So we've got the user over here. The user does not interact with the server. The user never interacts directly with the data. Instead, the user interacts with front-end software. Front-end software has all kinds of responsibilities too. It's to display, format, align, sort, everything that involves interacting with the user, finding out what the user wants in terms of data. That's the job of the front end. The front end then sends that information to the engine. The engine figures out whatever the action is, whether it's to insert data or whether it's to retrieve records back, and it sends back some response. Typically, especially when we're talking about in a relational database management, almost exclusively, what we have here going is a language called SQL, Structured Query Language, that the front end sends to the database engine. The database engine goes, oh, SQL, I totally know what to do with SQL. It either creates tables, puts data into tables, brings data out of tables, deletes data, and then sends back a response. The response is either the data the user asked for, an error that says, sorry, whatever you asked for didn't make sense to me, or it's some kind of confirmation message. You said you wanted to add some records, we added the records. You said you wanted to delete some records, we deleted the records. And so that is the environment that we're working in when we're interacting with databases from Excel. So what we're going to do is we are going to use Microsoft Excel as the front-end software. Really? Can we just take a spreadsheet program and use that as a front end to a database? And the answer is yes. Even without VBA, but to do stuff really interesting, we'll be using VBA for it. I will do an example with SQL Server, but they've kind of changed the way that we route traffic here in the university, and most of you won't be able to get to the SQL Server here today. So we'll be working with Microsoft Access so that there's no network involved. We'll talk about the network here. In fact, we may do that straight away. So actually, maybe what I'll do first is, let's see, I'm going to come to, you can do this along with me if you want. So here in Learning Suite today, there's a link to a database server that's just sitting at my house. And here's the credentials. VBA student, that's the username, and that is the password. These are the times to try men's souls. You might want to copy that. It's a hard one to type. But you'll type that in. And then this is a really simple interface. It's a web interface, but it just allows you to type in the SQL that you want to send to the server. And all this front end does is it sends the server back and displays back the response. So I could come here and say, select star. There's a database out there called Red Cat. It's like some online shoe sales information, shoe company. These are their customers. We could then, how many of you have some experience already with structured query language? How many of you are going, I've never used structured query language before? Okay, so you all have at least some experience with it. So the whole point is that we can ask questions, and the questions can get pretty complex. But I can, put a restriction condition on here where state equals Utah. Single quotes for strings in SQL. And execute that. And now the only records I'm seeing are those where the state is Utah. So we can make complex conditions. We can join multiple tables together, do all kinds of things. But then this just gives you the idea. There's a database somewhere. This web page just sends the SQL to that database, gets the information back, and then displays it here for you to be able to see. Okay, I don't think we've talked about ports yet in all of our learning. But let's just go to like BYU's homepage, byu.edu. I don't want to search, I just want to go to byu.edu. Okay, 1801, what is that? 18 wins, 0 losses, and 1 tie. BYU soccer has the NCAA. That's great news, I guess. Is that the women's soccer team? Wow, that's pretty impressive. I guess we don't often have a year like that. Otherwise, it wouldn't show up here. I'm thinking 1801, what happened in 1801? Thomas Jefferson was president. Maybe it was John Adams still, I don't know. Okay, anytime we interact with any kind of internet service, such as a web server, or a database server, or a mail server, or an FTP server, what other kind of servers are there out there? An RDP server, you're gonna do remote desktop protocol, you're gonna control some other computer from your computer. All these are all different kinds of services or servers that are sitting out there on the internet. And whenever we talk to them, it takes 2 pieces of information for us to be able to get to that server and communicate with it. One is we need its IP address. Well, we don't really think in terms of IP addresses. We think in terms of domain names. But when I come to this browser and I say, type in this domain name, byu.edu, the first thing that it does is it says, I gotta know, what the address, the IP address of that machine is. Just really quickly, we can take a look at this. Let me go to, I don't have command prompt here. What do I have? PowerShell. So I should be able to say ping www.byu.edu. And what? Ping just says, are you there? It says, are you there? And it will respond and say, yes, I'm here. Or it will ignore you. They don't have to respond. They could ignore you. I said, are you there? And it's ignoring me right now. But conveniently, it gave me the IP address. It actually said, oh, that's the IP address of the machine you're talking to. So even though we think of it as byu.edu, that has to get resolved into an IP address to actually make the connection. And so we're used to thinking about that, whether we think of it as a host name, byu.edu, or an IP address, 128. Whatever that was, that gets us to a machine. But that machine, that computer, could have lots of different services running on it. It could have a mail server, a database server, a web server, an FTP. It could have all these different things running on it. And so we always have to tell it a port. Now, why don't we have to specify the port here? And it's because if you don't tell it the port, the browser will automatically put in the port for you. The default port for web traffic is, let's see what would happen if we went to port 80. I'm not sure we'll get there. That's for HTTP traffic. The default port is for port 80. So I'm going to change that to HTTP, non-encrypted communication, and let's see if this will respond. Yeah, so it went there just fine. If I did that same thing and told it a different port it didn't respond on, :81, it's not listening on port 81, we're spinning here. It's going, I don't know. I'm waiting for a response. The browser has sent the response to that machine, and it said, hey, I'm trying to talk to you on port 81. And who's answering on port 81? Nobody. There's nobody listening on port 81. Who's answering on port 80? Yeah, web server is answering on port 80. I asked for that. It sends me back, some file. The default port for HTTPS traffic is 443, I think. We don't think about ports in terms of web because, unless you're doing development, because quite often that's one thing you'll do is you'll say, oh, I'm going to set up a different server on this place, but it's going to be on a different port. I have to know the port to be able to communicate with it when I'm testing things out. Still spinning, wondering when we're actually going to get there. So anytime we're dealing with a database server on the internet or just on the network in general, any kind of internet protocol network, even if whether it's just inside the building or going outside the building, I have to know the port. It's not enough just to know the IP address that I'm going to communicate with. I also have to know the port. And so the default port for Microsoft SQL Server is 1433. So I got to tell it, oh, I'm talking to you on. Finally gave up listening here. You got to tell it I'm talking about on port 1433. In the year 2001, I was paying attention when this happened. In the year 2001, there was a computer worm called the Slammer. Have you heard of it? Do you know what a computer worm is? You know what a worm is? You want to say it?
I'm not sure exactly what that virus is, but it's something that it just flows through but doesn't actually do anything.
So it's malware, and it might do something bad, but what worms do is they go from machine to machine, typically over the network, but over some kind of network protocol, and they replicate. So what the Slammer did was it took advantage of a vulnerability in Microsoft SQL Server 7. Most folks at that time, 2001, who were running Microsoft SQL Server didn't realize that their SQL Server was even open to the internet, that someone could make a request through the internet and talk to their SQL Server. They're just using it to run their data inside their company. But someone at Microsoft thought, wouldn't this be great if these were just all open on the internet? And so when you installed the default installation, it was listening on port 1433. So someone wrote this thing that said, virus is a worm that they installed on some SQL Server, and it just said, as fast as you can, randomly choose IP addresses and try to send this malformed message to a SQL Server on that IP address on port 1433. And if you're able to get at that machine, then infect it. And then that machine, as fast as it can, starts guessing random IP addresses and tries to infect other machines. It turned off the network for 24 hours. The internet was off for 24 hours. And it happened only from the time that it happened, within 45 minutes, there was so much traffic. All these machines, as fast as they can, sending requests to port 1433 at this IP address, at this IP address, at this IP address, that regular traffic couldn't get routed. You try to go to Amazon.com, and there's just so much traffic out there that you can't get through. It's overwhelmed. It was a denial of service attack. You know what a denial of service attack is? When you got a bunch of computers all hitting one target to overwhelm it so it can't do its normal work. It was a denial of service attack that attacked the whole internet. What do you suppose happened? Let's suppose you're an internet service provider. What's going to happen to you? People are paying you money to get them connected to the internet. What will happen to you? What's that? Any guesses? Yeah, your customer's going to call you. They're going to email you. Well, they can't email you. They can't get through. So they're going to call you. Hey, how come I don't have any internet connection? Because if I can't get to the internet, where do I think the problem is? Yeah, it's just somewhere in the first step. I don't have any idea that it's the whole internet that's broken. And so we've got all these internet service providers that are getting all these requests. I can't route any traffic. And they're looking at the traffic. Good heavens. What is all this 1433 traffic? This isn't normal. So what do? They put a little rule into their routers that says, if it's port 1433, ignore it. Just dump it off. And it took about 24 hours for enough computers or ISPs to have done that we could successfully get traffic through again. For a long time, those rules stayed around. So you couldn't reliably route port 1433 traffic on the internet, period, because they're like, yeah, we'll take those rules off someday, and they never did. So you always have this, this question about this port, but that idea that an internet service provider might say, oh, we're not going to route a particular port, might be a new idea to you about, that when you're connected to the internet, it's not enough just to be connected to the internet, but whoever is routing your traffic has to be able to say, not only are we going to route web traffic, we're also going to route this particular network traffic. So the whole reason for this discussion is that if you are on EduRoam, how many of you are connected on EduRoam? Okay, if you're not on EduRoam, what else are you on? iPhone. Oh, iPhone. You'd be able to do this on an iPhone. Yeah, no, it's, I mean, you're connected to your like access point or something on your phone. Your iPhone would route port 1433 traffic, but EduRoam does not route port 1433 traffic. If you're on BYU Guest, it routes almost nothing. It routes 25 email. It routes 80 web traffic, 443 secure web traffic, and 3 or 4 others, and that's it. They're saying if you're here as a guest, we're going to check your email and browse the internet, and that's about it. You want to go on database, get yourself authenticated. And so I don't even know if it's, since most of you won't be able to do this, I'm curious, are you interested to see us connect to that same SQL server from Excel, realizing you'd only be able to watch me do that because I'm on a wired network here and it routes all traffic? Or if you want to just go straight to working with Microsoft Access and get the network out of the way so that you can see the thing. It's the same process, regardless of whether you're working locally or remotely. Who says let's just go to Access? Who says we'd love to see you connect to Microsoft SQL Server? A few of you just see it once, okay. And at least it'll be on the video then, even though you won't be able to follow it along. All right. So I'm going to close this, come back to Learning Suite, and I'm just going to start with a blank workbook. All right, so insert a module. You're welcome to try this along with me. But if you're on EduRoam, I don't even know if BYU Secure is an option. Is BYU Secure? BYU Secure is one we used to do this on. Is it even an option for you anymore? Okay, here's the first thing. And you will want to do this because we'll need this even for when we switch over and do this with Access, is that we need to have a set of objects that knows how to talk to database server. So actually, let's do this first. Before we get into VBA, let me just come here. I'm going to choose data, get data from a database, and I'm going to find a SQL Server database. Unsurprisingly, Microsoft's very own database is the first choice here, and it's the easiest one to connect to. So it needs to know the server that we're connecting to, which is that same server here. It's just the IP address, not the port, or not the protocol. And database is user data. We'll say OK. Use my credentials? No, I'm going to use other credentials. Oh no, Windows, I'm going to use a database to authenticate me. Username is going to be VBA student. And the password, these are the times that try have been sold. It's a great long password. It kind of negates its purpose though, since I'm publishing this video on YouTube. So apply it to there, that's fine, and I will connect. I'm able to connect using the encrypted connection. Okay. All right, so we've now connected to that database server from Excel, and it's saying, look, here's a whole bunch of files. You know, which ones do you want? And I'll just bring in the list of customers. There's like 4,000 or so customers in this database. Red Cat customer. And I will load that, and it'll bring that in. At this point, it's kind of like a web query. So this is going to build a connection to that database that I can just say refresh from here on. So if the data changes over there on the server, I can just say, where's my refresh? I'm going to say refresh right here, and we'll send the request and bring that data back here. I can change the data here, and it will have no, I'll say that Cascade Locks is no longer in Oregon. It is now in Utah. I can change the data here. The connection is not the other way. The connection is just bringing the data to me. Questions so far? iPhone guy, did you try that? Yeah. Unable to connect. So it's a question of, is it routing that traffic on port 1433? And I don't know. There's no reason they have to. I would have thought they did. Okay. I can also, and so if all I'm trying to do is consume data, this is not a bad way to do it. I just bring the data in, and I can even specify on this, we'd have to see where it is, but I can tell it, no, don't bring it all, just bring the ones that I specify. I can give it an SQL statement, a query that will bring a particular set of records. So let's go ahead and take a look at how to do this from VBA, how to get at data from VBA. So first thing we have to have is we've got to have a set of objects that knows how to talk to a database server. And they are not just kind of built in, always there for VBA. And so I'm going to choose Tools, References. It seems like we've done Tools, References one other time, but I don't remember what it was for. Have we used references before? Does this look familiar? Maybe we haven't. Tools, References. And then these are all the different objects that I have access to on this machine. Some of these are from Adobe. So Adobe's made stuff available to the component object model, which is the way that Microsoft likes to interact with other software. So I'm going to come down here to Microsoft, and I'm going to find the Microsoft Active Data Objects library. Zoom in just a bit here. You'll want to do that. You will need this, even though we're not using SQL Server. Anytime we're going to interact from VBA to a database, we want this, Microsoft ActiveX Data Objects. Now, if you don't have 6.1, the most recent one you have will be fine for whatever you're doing. I think that the lowest one, 2.0, would work as well, but I'm just going to use the most recent one here. Now, when I select that, I now have the ability to declare references to the objects that are part of that ActiveX Data Objects, ADO, ActiveX Data Objects database stuff. So I'm going to create a thing called a connection. I'll just call it CN as an ADO DB dot connection. So step one is I've got to get a connection to the database that I'm going to work with. If I'm going to be looking at data that comes back, I've got to get connected to, I've got to have some way to work with those records, and that's a different object. Dim, I'll call it RS, record set, as an ADO DB dot record, not record, but a record set. I will also dim a connection. So dim CS as a string, just a connection string. It's just a configuration to tell these objects how to connect onto the database. And I think I used to have the SQL Server connection string specified here. Can I remember it? I don't think I can remember it. So let me just, let's see. You just see if I've got the connection in the example I did last semester. If not, I'll just pull it off of no, I don't think it's here. Okay. Well, this actually might be a better way to do it. So let's just say that I'm looking for a SQL Server ADO-DB connection string. I didn't have to type that far before it thought maybe I'm looking for a connection string. SQL Server connection strings. And this is the site, connectionstrings.com, that's got connection strings to connect on any database that you want to connect onto. .NET Framework, trusted connection, plenty to choose from. Standard security, server, database, password. Local DB. There's too many to choose from. I know I need server database, but it seems like there's a third thing that I need. Server database. Oh, I've got to tell it which connection to use. Let me just look a couple more places, then let me just go pull it off of Learning Suite. No idea what I just moved. Okay, let me go to last winter. Spreadsheet automation. Let me find the database day here. Here we go. There it is. Okay, so now I'm just going to use that as my connection string. So CS is just a string. And this should tell me the information I need to get connected. That's not the right server. But the driver is SQL Server, the database is user data, and then the server is just the IP address of the machine that I'm talking to. I'm then going to use that to get connected to the database. So actually, I'm going to make both of these. I'm actually going to instantiate these objects. So new connection and a new record set. Without the keyword new, it's just a variable that holds a reference to that kind of object, but that will actually create those objects. So now I should be able to say cn.connect or cn.open. I was kind of hoping I'd get some help here. Oh, good. cn.open, I'll give it the connection string, that's my string. I'll give it the username that I'm authenticating with, VBA, was it VBA student? And then the password. Oh, is it on this one too? There it is. Edit. Okay, so I need to get this into a sub-procedure. See your question, I'll be with you in just a second. Let me just see if I can run to that far without error. Good. I don't see anything, but I'm connected. I had no error to get this far. There's a question over here somewhere? Okay, so the question is, why are we instantiating these objects? And the answer is, most of the objects that we work with, we'll bind an object variable onto a range or onto a worksheet or onto a workbook. Those objects already exist. There's part of Excel. When the workbook's open, there it is. But in this case, these are objects that we have the code for, but Excel doesn't turn these on automatically. And so when I say new, it says, yeah, I'm making a variable to refer to this kind of object, but make one of those objects as well. When I make the connection, I get access to the object class, the definitions of all these objects. To actually get an object to work with, I've got to say new here. Yeah. So usually we're just hooking onto existing objects, but here we're creating them. Let me show you an alternative way to do this. If I dim this just as a record set, then I have an object variable that's allowed to point at a record set, but I have no record set. So I could come here. This will look a little familiar to you. I could say set rs equal to, and here, you know, when we're binding on an object, it might be like worksheets.add. Make a new object and then bind onto it. Well, I do the same thing here. New adodb.recordset. So this is just shorthand. Let me move this one up. So these two lines here do the same thing as this one line. So this is such a common pattern in VBA that they said, you know what, let's just let them put new right here and do both of those steps together. Declare the variable, build one of those objects in memory, and bind the variable to it. These two approaches do the same thing. But now that I have the connection, I should be able to say, I want to connect my record set onto that connection. So I will say rs.open. So that's how I get that record set hooked onto some data. The source that I'm going to use is my connection cn, not my connection string. I use the connection string to tell the connection how to get established. Then I use the connection itself. Oh, sorry, that's the second argument. Source is the query that I want to run. Select star from redcat.customer. I think I could just say redcat.customer without the select star, but you see you can put a structured query language statement here. Let's see if I can run that. I get there, okay. I'm going to come to my immediate window, and I'm just going to say I want to print rs.fields. The record set has the field. The record set actually holds one record at a time. It knows how to get to the other records, but it holds one record at a time, and it's in these fields. So I want field 0.value. So the first field that came back, whatever that column was, it was a 2. I can ask for the name of that column. That was customer ID 12. I could ask for the next one. What do you think the next one is? I guess this is the first name. There's the name of the field. Here is the value. So you can see I've got access to this data. It's kind of ugly at this point. I'm just kind of getting one little piece at a time. But now, of course, I could write a loop that just maybe just shows off the first names. Let's just do that real quick. Do until, let's make it a do in a loop. Debug.print rs.fields number 1 dot value. Now, this is an endless loop. I have no way to get out. So, in fact, this would keep, what would this print off? It's going to print James, James, James. I've never done anything to tell it to go anywhere else. It's still going to be looking at James. So I can say rs.move next. And that will tell it to move to the next record. And so it will do James, and it'll do whoever the next one is, whoever the next one is. I'm going to go ahead and step through that. I'm not going to push run because it'll end up with a problem. So there's James. Let me clear this off up here. There's Frederick, Ralph, Howe, Ulysses, Raquel. There they come. But how am I going to stop? It turns out that the record set object has a property that gets set to true if you've gone past the end of the data. It's called EOF, end of file. And right now it's false because I haven't read past the end of the file. And so I can do until rs.eof. And that should print off all 4,000 of those. Let me dim x as an integer. X equals x plus 1. And then I will also print off x just so we can see how many records we're getting. And it'll take a while. I probably should have put a... Now, it actually hasn't stopped here. This is just Excel saying I'm tired of writing this to the window. So it's still running. We were about a quarter of the way there when we stopped updating the screen. But once it gets to the end of it, then it'll kind of refresh. So here's now 4,402 records. Whew. That's the basic data kind of approach to be able to pull data off of an arbitrary database. The trick is figuring out what is this in your environment. And that is not something you guess at. It's not something you can just kind of guess and figure out. You got to talk to someone who knows. By the way, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to go and get connected onto the database yourself to pull data? So you don't have to be a burden on the good IT folks. Let me tell you how this really works. You need data. You know, got some corporate database somewhere. You say, you know, your boss says we need analysis of, you know, this set of customers or this set of sales or these events that have happened. We need you to pull the data and analyze it. Here's how it works. You know, if you don't have access to this data, you talk to the guy in the OIT department who, you know, you send him an email. And what happens to that email? You know, this person got the email. Oh, someone needs data. What does that person do with it? The guy in OIT, what does he do with it? You don't know the answer to this yet because you're new at this. He ignores it. He doesn't. He ignores it because he thinks you're probably not serious. He's going to wait until you ask the second time before he goes, okay, I guess I really do want the data. And so at that point, he will intend to respond. The first time, he never intended to respond. The next time he'll intend to respond, he may respond, but he may not ever get to it. So by the third time that you've said it, maybe you've come and talked to him in person, finally, hey, I really need this data. By this time, a week has gone by. And you say, okay, well, great, here's the data that I want. So you tell him exactly the data that you want. And he goes, yeah, I totally get it. 2 days later, he'll send you the data. Guess what? It's not the data you told him to get. And so you go back to him again and you say, listen, this is great data, beautiful data. It's not the data I asked for. And you explain, and by this time, now he's a little more familiar with the data, and this time he'll actually get it right. So a couple of days later, you'll get the data you asked for. What's the problem? The data you asked for isn't what you really needed. And so you go back and say, okay, hey, thanks for this so much. I realize I need something different. The problem is that when you're working with another human to access that data is that the feedback loop is terribly long, especially if you've got a partner on the other side of that that isn't especially cooperative or especially bright. Or you're probably bright, but just isn't familiar with the ways of data. And so although it will be more difficult to say to them, listen, just give me the connection string and give me some read access to this data, there'll be some hesitation on that. But eventually, when they realize you're not going away, they'll realize that's my easiest way now to deal with you is just to give you access. And then you can ask the questions yourself. So that's what's really valuable about this, what we're seeing here. And actually, we can ask all kinds of questions without VBA, but VBA is when you have to be able to update data, which is what we're doing for the project. So why don't we go ahead and do this example again, but we'll do it in the context of the project that you're going to be working on. Which I looked on the schedule, and I must have pushed it back a couple of times for the last class because it is due, it's like 4 days before the end of the term. But the problem is, it's not the last project. There's another project. So I decided not to move it up because some of you might have made plans already, and well, that database project's way out there. So, but just be careful. Don't let the last project sneak up on you. Even though students tell me the final project, the last project is substantially less difficult than the database project. Okay. Well, let me show you one more thing, which is kind of neat. Is that a range property, let's see, a range object, so here's sheet 1. The range object has a really great property. So we've been through this loop. Let me just say here, range A1. So just assuming whatever the default worksheet is, dot, what is it? Is it copy? Yeah, copy from record set. So the range object itself is wired to work with a record set. And so in A1, I'm just going to say copy from record set. What do I give it here? Just the record set. I'll run that. Bam, that was so fast. It was so fast because it didn't do anything. Maybe I was editing that, so. Range A1, copy from record set. Was there something else I have to put here? I don't think so. Let's try it again. I totally expected that to copy all that data and dump it right in there. Oh, maybe it's because I'm at the end of the record set. So let's stop this. And let me put this at the top before this loop. So the record set's open. I'm going to step through these one line at a time. There we go. So it dumped all 4,000 some odd records onto that, beginning at that location, just with copy from record set. And no matter what kind of loop you write to kind of put that data in there, copy from record set is going to be way faster than that loop. All right, are we ready to kind of do this in the context of the project? I guess I'm going to go ahead and post this, so let me save it. I'm going to call this SQL Server DB Fall of 19. All right, why don't we go ahead and actually, why don't we work in the homework assignment? Should we do that? Yeah, the project. So let's just go ahead and download the project itself. So where is it? It's due. It's not due in April at all. That is late. So I think it's due December 9th. No. Project database modification. Yeah, December 9th. There's one on December 12th, 3 days later. This one's on the 9th. I should have put this sooner in this semester. I know you're all broken up about that. Okay, so I'm just going to go and download the resource files for this project. It's kind of unexpected. Still took me there. So crime analysis R7 is the file that I'm going to want to work with. I'll download that. I may make a new folder for this. The data.zip file, that's actually the same crime files that we've already downloaded. So if you have access to those, you can just use those. We won't even need that for this example today. And so I just need the Excel file, and I need the database file. This is a Microsoft Access database, MDB, Microsoft database. Definitely the old style database. ACCDB is the kind of newer one, but this will work just fine for us. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close my existing workbook. And I'll open that assignment. Unless I didn't put it there. Maybe I didn't actually save it. Okay, here we go. So it seems like process data files is what we're going to have to do here. So remember, the whole idea behind this project is you've got all of the crime data for crimes known to law enforcement on university campuses. They're in a bunch of Excel files. You're going to have to open up those files one at a time, get the data off, and then write that data into the database. And so that's what you're doing here. The good news is, part of the code that I've already built for you will actually reset that database. So if you've added a bunch of records in and you decide, oh, I kind of want to go back, there's actually a tool here on the assignment that will just reset the data. And this reset data actually just calls this clear data subprocedure. And where is it looking for it? It's looking for it in the same location as the workbook path, a thing called universitycrime.mdb. You just go take a look and see if I got it in the right place. So I'm going to show this in the folder. It's in the same location. Oh, my educator has put my name into this. Let's go back and look at the code. It is looking, so here's the connection string that we're connecting with. It's using the ACE database engine. And the source file is the path of this workbook. And what's the file name it's looking for? Yeah, universitycrime.mdb. And what's mine named? Yeah, University Crime, my name. So that's going to be a problem. I either have to change the data, I have to change this to connect onto the right data file, or I'm going to have to change this. And this is the way I want to do it. That way, if I download your file, I don't have to rename my database to match yours. We'll go to the standard name. So that's just kind of an unfortunate thing that my educator puts my student name on that file. Okay, so I've downloaded it, and the trick is I made sure it was named universitycrime.mdb. I'm going to come back to the code here, and let's just, rather than work in the solution, I'm going to make a new module just for today. So insert module, write sub, write to access. Sub. And I think we probably already have the reference on, but let's check tools references. And yeah, Microsoft ActiveX data objects. Oh, 2.8, an earlier one. I did 6.1 earlier today, but 2.8 will be just fine. So I should be able to make those those three same variables. dim CS as a string. Oh, I do want to make sure that we're all here. Is anyone still trying to get the database downloaded and put in the right place? You need to wait another minute or two? You good? Yeah. I made a new module. Yeah, so I'm in the crime analysis, the project that you're going to do. So might be a good place to put the example where you might need it is right in the project file. So I just insert a module. Here's module 1. So let me also dim CN as an ADODB connection. And let's go ahead and we'll do 2 examples. We'll do an example of pulling data out, so you can actually work through that once, and then pushing data in, which is the heart of the project, is pushing data into it. Dim RS as an ADODB record set. Make sure you get record set here, not just record. Then we'll set the CS equal to, and then I'm just going to go copy that off of in the solution module. There's clear data here, but it's got that connection string already specified here. So I'll just take that whole thing. And we could spell this connection out, but this is a little bit more robust. It just says whatever the path of this workbook is, that's where you're looking for the file, but look for the thing called university crime. I'm not sure why I'm concatenating these 2 string literals, but there's no reason to do that. I can just put the semicolon on the end. I'm not even sure that semicolon is necessary, but I'll leave it there. I'll open the connection, cn.open. The connection string, select star from, oh, I don't even know what's there. Select star from, I think it's called observation. There's only 1 table in it. And that'll have to be a string, put in quotes. And then user ID I don't need. Connection.open, connection string. I was kind of expecting, oh, sorry. Yeah, this is the connection string. My mistake. CS, connection string. I'm just going to run and make sure that we're getting connected to there. Variable not set, oh, as a new connection, new record set. Okay, so looks like I'm getting connected okay. Let's just make sure that we can get to this point where we've got this code in, we've run to this point, and we've actually gotten there without an error. Again, we don't see anything about this connection, it's non-visual, but if you're connected there, look at me with a great look of satisfaction on your face. If you're not, you know, furrow your brow or raise your hand or something. You can be quite picky. Could not find the file. Okay, so let's go look in that location. Yeah. Yeah, just make sure it's the same place as the workbook is. Anyone else? So it looks like it's going pretty well. Someone raise their hand over here. Go ahead and hit run. Let's see what the error is. I'll be for everyone set. Ah, yeah, I missed this the first time too. Hit end. This has to say new connection or as a new ADODB. Yep, and the same thing for the record set. Ask me, I know everything. Couldn't find the file. So let's go look at that location. And crime analysis is where we are. Okay, go ahead and run this again. Hit debug. I'm just going to see if we can find it with a dir statement. Dir, this workbook.path. Just copy this work.path and university.crime. You won't want that semicolon on the end for the dir statement. You closing quote as well. Enter. It didn't find it, so it really isn't finding it. Let's go back and look one more time at it. Yeah, my guess is it's got an extra. You probably downloaded it, you opened it, and you just save as. Do this. Come over here and choose View, Options. Just click above it. View, where it says Hide Extensions of Known File Types, uncheck that. Say OK. Yep. Anyone else? Well, I guess I should have paused the recording for this. Oh, wow. No, I'm actually in a new, I just made a new module. All right, why don't we just go ahead and pull, let's see, there's a lot of data, but it should come out okay. Do you want to do the example to loop through the data, or do you want to do the example just to drop the data in with the record set? Copy from record set. Just drop it in. So let's go ahead and get the connection, the record set up now. So rs.open. And it wants to know the source and then the connection. So CN. And then range A1. Let's go ahead, we will go ahead and put the titles in. So let's first make a loop that loops across all of the fields and puts the names in, because when you just pull the data from the record set, the names don't come. So let's do this. Let me dim x as an integer for x equals 0 to rs.fields.count -1, because the count property is how many there are, but the index is it's 0 based. So let me just say I'm going to do whatever the active sheet is, range A1 dot offset 0 rows and x columns. So the first time it's going to offset 0. We'll be talking about A1. Second time we'll offset 1 and so forth. And I want the value of that to be equal to rs.fields sub x dot name. So this should just put the names of the columns right across starting in A1. If I've done that right, should be able to go back to my data. Crime analysis. I think I'm editing. Something wasn't quite right about it. Let me take a look at rs.fields sub 0 dot name. FIELDS. Am I still allowed to say LDS when I'm spelling fields? Item cannot be found in the collection corresponding to the requested name or ordinal. Oh, so it may be that it's not called observation. Let me just go open up that database and take a look and see what it is. The table is called crime data. Is there a space? There's probably no space. So this is, yeah, it's basically saying you probably came back with an error. There's no data here. So select star from crime data. Let me go back and try to execute that again. That looks a little bit better. So now I've put those field names across in row 1. So now I should be able to dump the rest of the data in A2. So range A2 dot copy from record set, and I'll give it RS. You know that the record set will get closed when I get to the end sub. It might not be a bad idea to say rs.close here and connection.close. Again, once I hit the end sub, Microsoft tells me it will close them and erase, delete the memory, free up the memory. But I don't think it hurts to actually put that in. Oops, I forgot to run it. So I'll stop this, I'll run the whole thing again. And now I've brought in all of that data from the one and only table in that database. And this should look familiar. It's data that we've worked with before. How are we doing? Question here?
So when you just dump all the data in one cell, it's smart enough to know to organize data in columns.
Yeah, the question is, so this seems strange because you're talking about one cell here and you tell it copy from record set. And yeah, it basically says, oh, we're going to start from here and we'll take this data and we'll just put it, it corresponds pretty nicely. A cell in a database table to a cell in Excel. So it just maps it over. Thank goodness. Otherwise, it'd be a whole bunch of data in that one cell. Too much, really. All right, we got 7 minutes. And we've actually got 2 days on database. And since we didn't connect to SQL Server, which normally takes quite a bit of time, I'm not sure we have 2 days to spend on database. Let's see if we can get the example to actually write data into this table working, and then maybe I'll adjust the schedule, and we may not need 2 days for database this year. Actually, this example was not writing to Access. This was reading from Access, so let me just go ahead and change that. Writing to Access is going to look the same, but we do not need a record set. The record set is only to pull the records back. When we're writing to Access, we are just pushing the data to it. But I'll still want my connection to be open just the same. But now, with that open connection, I should be able to just execute a query, and the language is cn.execute. I just got to give it a valid statement. Insert into, now the name of the table is crime data. Then I'll tell it the fields I want to insert into. Good thing I have the fields here so I can look at them. Why don't we do report year and state? Report year, state, values, 2019. Actually, I don't think I need to put quotes around it. I do need to put quotes around string data, but not numeric data, just like in VBA. Numeric literals don't take numbers, string literals do. Utah. Do you want to put anything else in here? That should get us started. If I run that without error, I've just pushed that record into the database. I guess I can see it by reading the data out, and that should be the very last record. There it is. Access automatically generated a new value for the primary key, the unique identifier for this record, but I've got the 2019 and the Utah right here. So inserting the data into the database is just a matter of properly formatting, am I editing this now? Is properly building an insert statement to do this. And there's lots of ways that you could build a string, but you've got to get that string built into a valid structured query language statement. So let's look at maybe a couple of examples that might be helpful for the project. Let me dim template as a string. And let me set template equal to this. But instead of having my values here actually put in, let me just put, there's nothing magical here. This is just something that I could find and replace. Maybe I'll use angle brackets. I'll call this RY for report year. I'll leave the quotes in there. And I'll change this one to be ST for state. Then I could just use replace on template. Template equals replace. Looking at template, looking for something, RY, and replacing it with something else. Now, in the project, you're going to be pulling what you're replacing into the query. You're going to be pulling that from those other database files, those other Excel files. Here, I'm just hard coding it. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to make a template if I'm just hard coding it. But when you're doing this, you'll be pulling it out of those other database files. So let me take state, the little tag I built for state, and this one we'll call Wyoming. And so I will then execute my template. And that should, go ahead and pull the data back from Access. That should bring that record in now. Do you see what we did here? We kind of made a general purpose query. And then we put in what we wanted to actually put in. So that's kind of the basics of pushing data in. What would happen if I tried to replace report year with an empty string? What would my query look like? It would say insert into crime data report year state values, and then what? Values, open parenthesis. What would the next character be after this executes? Say it again. No, because the state is still going to be there. I'm replacing these characters with a zero-length string. So that part's just going to go away. They'll say values, nothing, and then it'll have a comma. What do you think it's going to like that? I don't think it's going to like that at all. Syntax error. Not allowed to do that. So if I want to say nothing, the way I do it is with a reserved keyword in SQL called null. I actually have to get null into the query string, so it's got to be a string here. As it turns out, null is also a VBA keyword. I mean, it knows what null is. Null is the absence of a value. So, but I actually want to put in 4 characters, N-U-L-L, into this string so that the word N-U-L-L gets interpreted by the database. Oh, it goes, oh, there's no value for this. That should work. And I'll pull data back. And so now it's put in this one with no report year. So that's kind of a tricky thing about working when you say I've got no value here. The way you do it is by building, and let's just go ahead and print the template out. And so I actually have to get that word null into the string that I'm trying to send off to Access to be processed. Folks, that is what you need to do the database project. We've spent like 3 days doing kind of chipping away at the project. We've kind of gotten 3 different parts plugged in there for you. So good luck with that. Unless I can think of something really great else to do in database, I may adjust the schedule a little bit, so things might shift up a day, but I won't change any due dates. All right, thanks for coming. Class dismissed.